Hello everyone and welcome to webinar What does it mean to be a shareholder of the company? My name is Cheetal, senior support team member, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. Before we get started, I would like to provide some important information. I have uploaded handout which can be downloaded and saved on your system for your ready reference. If you have any questions, they can be submitted anytime in the question box on the webinar's control panel and I will answer them at the end of the webinar. Or you can email them at cheetal@trustdeed.com.au and I'll try to answer them at the earliest. Without further delay, we'll start with our webinar. A disclaimer is provided in the presentation. Please read the disclaimer before we proceed ahead. In this webinar, we'll discuss what are shares of the company, who can be a member of the company, how to become a member of the company, beneficial holding of shares, record of shares, clarification on joint shareholding, issue of share certificates, members meeting. When anybody talks about company, they usually talk about shares. So what are shares? A share is a unit of capital or investments in the company. A company divides its capital into shares which are offered for sale to raise capital. The total share capital of the company is divided into number of shares. For example, if the company is worth $10 million and there are 5 million shares issued, then each share is worth $2. Shares can be broadly divided into two categories: equity shares and preference shares. Equity shares give their holders the power to share the earnings or profits in the company as well as to vote in the general meeting of the company. Such shareholder shares the profit and also bears the losses incurred by the company. On the other hand, preference shares earn their holders only dividends which are fixed, giving no voting rights. Preference shareholders have preference over equity shareholder in case of dividend and also in case of winding up of the company. Now we know what are shares. Let's see what it means to be a shareholder. A person who holds shares in the company is called shareholder or member of the company, and they have certain rights and responsibilities. Equity shareholders are regarded as the real owners of the company. Let's have a look who can be a member and who cannot be a member of the company. An entity that can own property, sue, or be sued can be a member of the company. Any person or a legal entity can own shares in a company. A member of the company must be a person, a body corporate, that is XYZ Company Pty Ltd, or a body politic, example State of Queensland. A trust cannot hold shares in the company, but trustees of the trust can hold shares of the company for the benefit of the trust. A business name is not a legal entity and therefore cannot be a member. Estates and trusts cannot hold shares in their own right. They must nominate an executor or a trustee. The Corporations Act 2001 does not specify a minimum age for a member of the company. However, a company may make its own determination regarding a minimum age for a member. All companies must have at least one member. Proprietary companies must have no more than 50 members that aren't employees of the company. There is no limit on the number of members of the public company. As it may apply to a court to have a company wound up if it does not have any members. Section 113 of the Companies Act states that a proprietary company must have no more than 50 non-employee shareholders, but there is no limit for public company. Shareholders are given certain rights. These rights may include the right to sell their shares, the right to vote on the directors nominated by the board, the right to nominate directors and propose shareholder resolutions, the right to dividends if they are declared, the right to purchase new shares issued by the company, the right to assets that remain after liquidation. Many of them are not aware what the beneficial ownership of shares is. So I would like to provide some clarification which will help you to understand the concept of beneficial ownership of shares. If the owner of the shares is entitled to direct benefit from the shares are said to be beneficially held. If the shares of the company are owned for the benefit of someone else, then the shares are not beneficially held. Beneficial owner is a person who enjoys the benefit of ownership even though the title of the asset is in name of another person or entity. Beneficial held shares means that the owner of the shares is entitled to the direct benefit from the shares. For example, dividends. Shares held by a person as trustee, nominee, or on account of another person are non-beneficially held. That is, the member holds the shares for the benefit of someone else. When a trustee or executor is listed as the holder of the shares should be shown as not beneficially held. This requirement does not apply to listed company. Benefits here include voting power and or receiving dividends. There may be various reasons why a person would hold shares for the benefit of others. One of such reasons is that a trust cannot hold shares in a company. Therefore, shares of the company would be registered in the name of the trustees for the benefit of the trust. Shares held by a person as trustee, nominee, or on account of another person are non-beneficially held. For example, X is the shareholder in company ABC Pty Ltd. All dividends are going to be paid directly to him. Since X is the one deriving benefit from the shares, he is beneficially holding the shares. If X sets up a family trust and is a trustee of the trust and wants earnings from the company shares to go through the trust, in this case, X is not beneficially holding the shares but for the benefit of the trust. X is in whose name the shares are registered is the registered owner, and the trust for whose benefit shares are held is the beneficiary owner. The members of a company own the company, but the company has a separate legal existence and the company's assets belong to the company. As a member, you are not liable in your capacity as a member for the company's debts. Your only financial obligation is to pay the company any amount unpaid on your shares if you are called on to do so. If the company is not a company limited by shares, in some circumstances, members may have to contribute to the cost of winding up of the company and any incidental cost. You can make decisions about the company by passing resolutions at the members or shareholders meeting. You may wonder why company issue shares. Shares are issued by a company to raise money to fund company projects or because the owners of the company want a big lump sum of money for working off the company. There are a number of ways you can become a member of the company. Shares of the company can be acquired either directly from the company itself by way of share allotment or from an existing shareholder by share transfer. Let's have a look at acquisition of shares from the company. When company offers its shares for subscription, people can apply for such shares. Applicants may be allotted shares on certain conditions, rules and regulations being met. People who are allotted shares become the company's members or shareholders. Allotment of shares in case of public companies and private companies are different. In private companies, the allotment will be a private arrangement between the company and those who invest in it. A public company may make the issue through stock exchange or alternative investment market. You can become a member at the time of registration of the company. You must have given your consent to be a member before the application for registration is made. The names and address of all persons who have consented to be members form part of the application for registration as an Australian company. Or you can agree to become a member of a company that is already registered with ASIC. After you have given consent, your name is entered on the register of members. The company is responsible for notifying ASIC of changes to the register of members. Or you are already a member of the company limited by guarantee and that company converts to a company limited by shares. Now let's go further to acquisition of shares from an existing shareholder. Subject to such restrictions as appear in the company's constitution, a shareholder may sell his or her shares to another person. A sale or gift of shares will be called transfer of the shares. If a shareholder dies, the shares get transferred to legal hire and this is called transmission of shares. The Corporation Act requires every company with share capital to maintain a record of all the shares that the company has issued. This record is called the Register of Members or Share Register. The register contains information about the members or shareholders of the company and the shares existing in the company. When unlisted company having share capital receives notice about the shares not beneficially held, the company must record it in the register of members reflecting any shares that a member does not hold beneficially. Let us have a look into the information that must be recorded in the share register. The information of members that must be entered in the register are their name and addresses, the date on which their name was entered in the register, the shares held by each member, and whether the shares are beneficially held or not. The register must also contain the following information about shares as to the date of every issue or allotment of shares, the number of shares in each allotment, the classes of shares, the share numbers if any, or the share certificate number, whether or not the shares are fully paid, including the amount paid on the shares and amount unpaid on the shares if any. When two or more person or company own shares in the company, they are said to be joint shareholders. A trust can also own shares in the company, but the trustees of the trust is the legal owner of all assets of the trust. Hence, the trustees of the trust will be the shareholder on behalf of the trust. If you have two individuals or two companies as trustees of the trust, then they can be joint shareholders in the company and they will own shares on behalf of the trust. So, how many joint shareholders can there be? Theoretically, a company may register a transfer or allotment of shares into the joint names of any number of joint shareholders. For practical reasons, however, many companies limit the maximum number of joint shareholders via their constitution. Do all joint shareholders have the same rights? No, they don't. There are many rights confirmed to the joint shareholder named first in the company's register of members than to the other joint holders. It is the first named holder who has the right to vote at company meetings, appoint a proxy and sign any shareholders' written resolutions. The law does not give the same rights to other joint shareholders, partly to ease the administrative burden on companies. Do companies need to communicate with all joint shareholders? Again, no. The company is only compelled to communicate to the first named joint shareholder with regard to the notice of annual and extraordinary company meetings, dividend notices and warrants, and any offer in respect of rights issue or bonus issues of shares. Delivery to the first holder is deemed to be delivery to all joint shareholders. It's important, therefore, when allotting or transferring shares to joint shareholders, that the person named first is the one who is most appropriate and willing to deal with the correspondence and who has the trust of other joint shareholders and the time to forward on any information to them. There is nothing to stop a company sending information to all joint shareholders, but law does not require it. Now coming to share certificates. Share certificate is a document signed on behalf of a company which states that the person is a registered holder of number of securities. A share certificate serves as a legal proof of ownership of the number of shares indicated. A certificate issued specifying shares held by a member of the company in accordance with the provisions of the Corporations Act is a prima facie evidence of the title of the member to the shares. So, what information must be mentioned in a share certificate? A company must ensure that a certificate it issues specify the shares held by a member of the company, the name of the company and the fact that it is registered under this act, and the class of the shares and the amount, if any, unpaid on the shares. A failure to comply with the above provision does not affect the rights of the holder of the shares. However, failure to comply with this subsection is an offense under the Corporations Act. Share certificates are part of the company documents and executed in the same way as any other document. Section 127 of the Corporations Act describes how a company may execute company documents. Pursuant to this section, a company may execute a document, that is, agreement, deed, share certificate, with or without using a common seal, if signed by two directors, one director and company secretary, or one director if he is the sole director. The benefit of a company document sorry. The benefit of a company document being signed as per section 127 is that if executed this way, people will be able to rely on the assumption in section 129 subsection 5 that the document has been duly and properly executed. However, section 127 subsection 4 clearly states that this subsection does not limit the way in which a company may execute a document. Therefore, a company can execute documents as per any provisions in the Constitution or as directors decide. Proprietary companies and public companies have different responsibilities for notifying ASIC about changes. Proprietary companies must inform ASIC of any changes to member details and the share structure, including the issue or cancellation of shares and share conversion or division. Public companies are only required to inform ASIC of changes to the share structure, including the issue or cancellation of shares and share conversion or division. They are not required to inform ASIC of changes to members' details. Failure to inform company about the non-beneficial ownership and changes therein is an offense of strict liability under criminal code and penalties may apply. We have seen the role of members. So let's have a look now into the requirements for the meeting of the members of the company. Meetings of the shareholder of the company may be held regularly or to resolve specific questions about the management or business of the company. The process to be followed in calling meetings, conducting meetings, and voting at meetings is in the Corporations Act. A proprietary company can pass a resolution without a physical meeting being held if all members entitled to vote on the resolution sign a document stating that they are in favor of the resolution. This, however, does not apply to a resolution to remove a company auditor. So, how is the meeting of members called? Company directors have the power to call meetings of all members or meetings of only those members who have a particular class of shares. A company may have different classes of shares to which different rights and restrictions are attached. Members who hold at least 5% of the votes that may be cast at the general meeting of the company have the power to call and hold a meeting themselves or require the directors to call and hold a meeting. Now moving to quorum. A quorum is the minimum number of members required to be present to legally transact business. For a meeting of the company members, a quorum of at least 2 members must be present for the full meeting unless otherwise specified in the company's constitution. Now, voting rights of members. Different classes of shares may have different rights to vote at meeting of members. Unless specified by the company's constitution, each member has one vote in the show of hands, and in a poll, each member has one vote for each share held. If a company has only one member, that member may pass a resolution by recording and signing the decision. A member of a company that is entitled to attend and cast a vote at the meeting of members may appoint a person as a proxy to attend and vote for them at the meeting. There are two types of resolutions passed at the meeting of members. They are ordinary resolution and special resolution. An ordinary resolution must be passed by a majority, 50% or more of the votes cast by members entitled to vote on the resolution and who vote at the meeting in person or by proxy if proxies are allowed. A special resolution must be passed by at least 75% of the votes cast by members entitled to vote on the resolution and who vote at the meeting in person or by proxy if proxies are allowed. We finally come to the end of the webinar. I hope you enjoyed it, and if there are any questions, please email them to me at cheetal@trustdeed.com.au. I shall try and answer them as soon as possible. So once again, thank you for attending the webinar and hope to see you in the next webinar. So bye for now and enjoy the rest of your day.